previous structure, so there was an uncomfortable marriage between the two. I mean, the most extreme of which was in the armed forces, where the revolution needed an army to defend itself against the, because Russia signed a peace with Germany and got out of the First World War and was then invaded by a number of armies. And there was a big debate. Well, who's going to lead the armed forces? So Trotsky, who ends up being the leader of the Red Army, wins out. And the debate was, the resolution of the debate was, we had to get white generals, that is generals that supported the other side, but would surround them with two red commissars. Kind of a slightly clumsy way of, in essence, trying to overcome what had been inherited from the old society, if you see what I mean. But that was one example, it seems to me, of the problem. I think under modern capitalist society, that problem is much less than it was at the turn of the century. And in part it has to do, I think, with the increase in specialized knowledge to much broader layers than existed before. But that would get us, I think, into a more complicated topic, which we can come back to, but that's just my thoughts on it for now. On the question of revolutions and the criteria for revolutions, or for what is and isn't revolutionary, I think that the main thing for Marx that you get out of the writings of Marx on that question is what I started saying at the very beginning about the unity between theory and practice, and the way in which Engels' description, Marx above all else was a revolutionist, gives you a certain insight to the way that they judge that question. There's a famous letter, that is, if you read Marx's letters, there's one outstanding letter. Is it to Krugman, Paul? Do you remember? In which he says, people give me the credit for having come up with this, that, and the other. He says, that's not my invention. It's a bit what I started at the beginning, what Marx didn't discover. What I did discover is, I think I can't remember the three, anyway, I did discover that the class struggle is the motor of history, but then he goes on to say that the outcome of that struggle is therefore the movement towards socialism and so on. The implication being that engagement in that aim is what becomes the yardstick for judging what was revolutionary, which is somewhat different from Marx's initial writings, in particular in 1844 through to 1848, which is the philosophical manuscripts to the writing of the Communist Manifesto. And I think that as his writing evolves, that's the way to get out of the conundrum between, or the uniting of thought and action, and it's in that resolution, in actual practice, that gets determined. Now, that's a little abstract, but I think that that's the direction in which one has to go to begin to understand that. As far as industry and places and what people do, I think some of the most amazing things, because I've lived in a couple of countries, is shared among industries and different people, but really is what happens when people begin to act together and with some confidence to change things. And that I've had the opportunity to be involved in and seen. And many, many features are the same everywhere. People are no longer hunkered down. They don't feel as self-conscious, stuttering, nervous. They begin to feel that there's something beyond themselves individually and a bond that they have. And it's not only that I've seen it, I know it to be true. I know that a whole generation, my generation and generation before me, who grew up in the 1960s and 70s, many of those people still look back and say those are the best times of our lives. And it's not because I'm now over the hill and cranky, which I will admit to, not on camera, mind you, but because it was really the sense that life had more meaning than being an isolated and individualized kind of person. And I have to say that sentiment is sorely lacking in the United States today, because I do think that people are made to be fearful, are atomized, and are also cynical, which is something that you can judge. Anybody will tell you City Hall's corrupt. Anybody, of course it is. What's new about that? Well, there's something a little wrong, that we go around and everybody knows that the whole gosh darn thing is corrupt and that they're just thieving us. But nobody does anything about it. Great. But the freedom is in your ability to, or our ability to think that. And I think that, it's the beginning of, again, the coming together of people, and in changing the world, changing themselves and beginning to know who we are. And I think that's...
All right, I'm going to go around for one last round of questions, and I'm going to come back to Ahmed to wrap up. It's been a great night, a lot of really big questions, and a lot of good ideas out there tonight. Really enjoyed being a part of this conversation about these big ideas. So let's go around one more row of hands, and before we start, I wanted to remind everybody that if you're interested in seeing what the International Socialist Organization is doing, there's going to be a meeting this coming Sunday at Cafe Roma at 6 o'clock. So everybody's welcome to that. Cafe Roma, 6 o'clock. All right, so let's start.
Yeah, okay. I just want to say something on production as well, because I think workers who work in a workplace know how to run the plant or any kind of workplace better than the management. And I was laid off 20 months ago from the place I was working at, which was a heavy industry place. We were making railroad cars. But I think there the workers knew how to run the plant better than any management. And a couple of years before I was laid off, they had this thing that had come in called lean manufacturing, and this idea, and we had all these meetings, and they called the workers in, and the idea was, how can we make the plant run more efficiently? But it wasn't for the benefit of the workers, it was for the benefit of the management. And so they'd be saying, basically, well, how can we make a job which two people are doing, just have one person doing? So that means, one person's going to lose their job. So, what we need is planning with works ideas that are going to benefit workers. So, we're going to cut the working week or whatever. I remember there was a big Ford plant in Dagenham in London, and the foreman went out on strike there. And when they went out on strike, the plant worked a lot more efficient than before. So really, we don't need these middle management people telling us, all the management telling us, that we need to run this machine or that machine. We can run it ourselves, and I think that's kind of what it really comes down to. We need some kind of coordination for the different kind of workplaces. But basically, workers in the workplace know how to do this stuff. We don't need people telling us how to do it and then just lay us off when we're of no more use to them.
All right, Hall again, and then we're okay. Anybody else?
Okay, I just want to come back on a couple of things. Did the person who asked about revolution leave? I'm going to talk about it anyway.
You can say anything.
I'm going to first just quote Leon Trotsky, because at the beginning of his excellent book, The History of the Russian Revolution, he says, "A revolution is the forcible entrance of the masses into the realm of the rulership over their own destiny." In other words, for Marxists, the question of revolution is about masses of people coming out into the streets, seizing the factories, seizing the land, and seizing the houses, housing the homeless, figuring out through people's own self-activity and through struggle how to confront the powers that want to keep things the way they are, and then through confronting those powers, create new institutions, direct democracies through which they can begin to reorganize society. That's what a revolution is. So what does it mean to be a revolutionary? It means to be someone who in their life organizes and commits themselves to building movements. Most of the time it's for movements that are for immediate reforms, but which mobilize people in such ways that they begin to feel out the kind of power and the kind of struggles and the kinds of collective actions that would be necessary to get to the point where we could pull all these struggles together into one solid fist that could really punch a hole in the system. That's what a revolution is. And so what does it mean to be a revolutionary? It means being for collective action, not for the actions of individuals or small numbers. It means to be for ordinary people taking control of their own lives, not an elite making decisions on behalf of people. You know, or it means certainly in every revolution, the other side wants to use force to stop our side. It means, of course, that our side may have to use force, but it's in the context of the collective action of the majority, of the whole people fighting for a new kind of society, not the actions of a small band of guerrillas with AK-47. In other words, there's a whole number of ways that we as Marxists would define being a revolutionary. And of course, there's the question that was raised, which is always, well, what is that going to lead to? And you know, historically, sort of one of the most popular ideas in society that we're told is that revolutions always go bad. You know, they either lead to the rule of another class or of a bureaucracy, and does that mean that workers can't run society? I like what was said here about production, that is, workers can run production. That doesn't obviate the whole question of experts